Good evening, or good afternoon, whatever time of day it is. Welcome to my channel. As ever, I shall be telling you a short story which is based upon and using 5 random words chosen by an online text generator. And those words for today are... And the story is called... actually, before I say what the story is called, generally my stories are exactly 1,000 words just because I'm a bit OCD and it kind of helps to give an idea of, what I'm aiming for. This one is a bit longer. It's quite complicated and I just didn't feel I could reasonably do it justice in 1,000 words, so bear with me. It is called The Purple Heart. Break time's over, lads. Come on, Godfrey, put that out, you goddamn goldbricker. The way he conducted himself, you'd think work detail leader Brad Knight was a platoon sergeant in a World War II movie. Will Godfrey stubbed his cigarette into a nearby glob of something disgusting and stuffed the cotton wool balls back up his nose. 2 more days of this and he'd finally be free from the dumb sentence the judge had ordered for Will's latest heinous crime. When the gavel had gone down in court 3 months ago, Will found himself laughing at the judge's order. A $1,000 fine and 12 weekends of working for the Department of Sanitation, all for emptying out a deep fat fryer into a public drain behind the restaurant where he worked as a pot washer. Admittedly, he'd argued with a cop about it and called him a fat fucker, and fair enough, Will had a colourful rap sheet including brawling, breaking and entering and stealing a pretzel wagon, teenage hijinks. But 12 weeks in a sewer battling fatbergs and solidified drifts of toilet tissue, human excrement and hair was excessive. Will considered appealing the controversial ruling, but his attorney advised against it. In fact, he'd practically forbidden it. Just do your service, pay your fine and put this behind you. Good advice for sure, but Will would love to see the judge down here in the horrific old Chicago sewer prizing used tampons and diapers out of a wall of yellow fat. Will had spent the first 3 days gagging and being sick. He had learned not to eat before noon. As he set to work with his protective gear, high-pressure hose and harpoon, as he called the metal tool used to scrape free persistent agglomerations, Will was literally counting the hours. He hardly spoke to any of his fellow sewage workers, around half of them recidivists like himself. He just got on with the task in hand and showered for at least 30 minutes at the end of each day. "Let's get this little honeypot broken up and go home, boys," shouted Mr. Knight, attempting brusque camaraderie. This little honeypot was a fatberg big enough to earn its own postal code, and Will was hard at work spraying it with a solvent that dissipated the fat, then prizing free persistent chunks. He was at the head of the line, on the far side of a brick bulwark, away from the others. Abruptly, he lowered his hose, having seen something sparkle amongst the gristly grey berg. Will reached out to prise it free. It looked metallic. He managed to hook a piece of coloured fabric attached to it. "Fuck me," he felt the need to exclaim. He held in his gloved hand a surprisingly well-preserved purple heart, the unmistakable profile of George Washington standing out against the dark background. Quickly remembering what kind of individual he spent his days with, Will shoved the medal into the pocket of his jumpsuit and got on with his work, heart thumping. The following Monday, as he sat in the public library going through the job advertisements, planning for his fat-free future, Will surreptitiously took the purple heart out of his pocket. On its reverse was an engraved motto, "For military merit," and then, in a different typeface, "Harold D. Buckley." Having a naturally curious nature, part of the reason for his extensive rap sheet, Will couldn't resist letting himself in through an open window, he Googled the name. There it was, in a list of awarded World War II servicemen. Buckley had been given the Purple Heart for his role in the 1945 Battle of Corregidor, in which US troops had retaken the island from the Japanese. He had led a group of men who'd attacked a Japanese gun emplacement, shelling the island's military hospital. For his efforts, Buckley ended up in that self-same hospital and had to have his left leg amputated. But the battle was won. Learning this, Will felt a pang of guilt. He'd already searched several online auction sites and militaria suppliers for the resale value of the medal, and had been disappointed to discover he'd be lucky to get $40 for it. Over 1 million were issued during the Second World War. Not only would it be far from profitable to sell the medal, Will realised that, given that it had been engraved and he knew who it belonged to, it would be wrong to do so. His natural inquisitiveness and a strange new sensation that he guessed was honour led Will to a firm conclusion. He would give the medal back. It took just 1 more hour of online database research for Will to unearth the address of Buckley's widow, who resided in assisted living accommodation in Lafayette, Indianapolis. Just a 3.5-hour journey on 2 Greyhounds, practically next door. Let's face it, what else did he have to do? The next day, Buckley was in Lafayette, wandering up and down South Street, trying to locate the Seven Elms retirement village. He found it up a shady, tree-lined lane. Number 47 was a cute little bungalow, with a porch and a wheelchair ramp zigzagging up to the front door. It took 3 increasingly insistent knocks before a hunched figure appeared behind the screen door, clutching a walking frame. "Mrs. Ida Buckley?" Will asked, half expecting a shake of the head and to have the door slammed in his face. Instead, the comparatively sprightly nonagenarian invited him in for cookies and homemade lemonade. Will began to suspect Ida had mistaken him for her home help, but at least it got him in the door. Unfortunately, when he explained himself and presented her with a purple heart that had belonged to her long-deceased husband, Ida's face did not break into the radiant glow Will had imagined on the coach ride from the Windy City. Instead, she scowled, her liver-spotted and gnarled hand batting Will's away. "I threw that away for a reason. Don't want the darn thing back." It transpired that Ida had attended a special celebration event for war widows in Chicago in 2015 to mark the 60th anniversary of the Far Eastern Campaign. There she'd been surprised, then shocked, to meet a woman called Annabelle Nguyen, apparently her late husband's daughter, by a woman called Rose he'd met in Manila during his 6-month recuperation in 1945. For all his heroism, Buckley had fallen in love with his nurse, had led a secret life, fathered a child, and Ida had known nothing about it. That night in her hotel, she'd wept for the first time in years and had flushed the medal down the lavatory, pushing it around the U-bend with her walking stick. 2 hours later, Will sat in a local bar, downing his 5th bud and wondering if the awful country covers band would stop murdering Waylon Jennings songs any time soon. It took another couple of beers before they did. Nothing had gone according to plan, and Will felt more than a little foolish. Didn't anyone want to be reminded of serviceman Harold D. Buckley's sacrifice? Will was probably still a little drunk the following morning as he sat in an internet cafe and bought himself a return ticket to Manila, all but draining his bank account in so doing. He'd never previously journeyed further than Florida, and here he was going 8,000 miles on a probable wild goose chase. Still, it wasn't as if Will had a full schedule or busy social calendar ahead of him. Why not have an adventure? Will obtained the necessary documents and shots, packed a raggedy suitcase, and was on an all-Nippon Airways flight, how ironic, to the Philippines 3 days later. Arriving at Ninoy Aquino International Airport on 31st of June, Will was assaulted by a wall of moist heat. Taxi drivers jostled for his business, but he waved them away and grabbed a tuk-tuk to his mid-price hotel in Makati, one he couldn't really afford, but had chosen very carefully nevertheless. Will didn't draw attention to himself on arrival, simply crashing onto his bed with the aircon on full. Chicagoans aren't made for mid-30s humidity, and it would take Will several days to adjust to everything about this chaotic, sticky, fragrant, and beautiful country. He walked the lively city streets, jogged along the Baywalk, visited Fort Santiago and some of the war memorials, drank sickly cocktails, bided his time. 4 days later, what Will had been waiting for finally occurred. A woman came into the hotel lobby where Will was sipping a coffee and pretending to read a 3-day-old New York Times. The woman was extraordinarily petite, probably not quite 5 feet tall, in her mid-20s, and wore wide-rimmed glasses that gave her pretty face an owlish cast. She began to tend to the plants in the lobby, removing dead leaves, spraying insecticide, watering everything. Will surreptitiously watched her, at one point sliding along the banquette seating to allow her access to a bold display of orchids. As she was completing her rounds and packing away her equipment, Will lowered his paper. "Cherry Newen." The woman's response was almost comic. She jumped back, pushed her glasses up her nose, and looking panic-stricken. No, Will said quickly. "I'm a friend. Well, I come in peace. Sorry, this is stupid. I have something for you. Something from your grandfather. Look." Flustered, blushing unexpectedly, Will handed over the presentation box he'd sourced online. Christ, this was ridiculous. What was he trying to prove, and why had he sprung it on her like that? Cherry took the gift with a perplexed smile and opened it, sitting down on the edge of a large circular planter. Inside, of course, was the purple heart, newly polished. Will had had plenty of time to work on its restoration, unpicking the seam on the ribbon so it could be separately dry cleaned, then stitching it back together. When Cherry turned the medal over, she gasped audibly, and then she did something that helped Will understand that nothing he'd done in the last 10 days had been stupid. She smiled, an expression of surprise and joy that filled Will with something he'd not felt for months, complete, uncomplicated happiness. "Amazing," Cherry said. "Thank you so much. But how?" Will bade Cherry join him at his table, ordering them 2 cool drinks, and told her his story, leaving nothing out, not even his crimes. "I'm Will Godfrey," he began, "and I have made many mistakes." With that simple introduction, 2 lives became intertwined by a remarkable chance. Will came to know the woman he would later credit with saving him, and Cherry met the man who gave her an incredible gift before he even knew her. This Will Godfrey, her crazy Yankee husband. The end. So yes, that story ventured far and wide and involved quite a lot of research, but it was fun doing it, and I didn't really want to start hacking away. I would have had to lose 800 words or something to get that down to 1,000, so I did not. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider subscribing, maybe watch another one, and tell your friends, and I will see you again very soon. Thank you. Bye.